Thank you everyone, all the members of the public, which we don't appear to have any of this evening, councillors and officers who are joining us for today's meeting. Please be aware that the council is video recording this meeting and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I'd like to highlight key formats of the meeting. Please can I ask everyone to have their phones turned off or set to silent. The fire exits are via the doors out of the chambers and down the external fire escape stairs or via the main entrance that you enter the building through. In the event of a fire, the lift should not be used and the assembly point is outside the Royal Mail Parcel Office on West Street. Please remain seated unless you're invited to speak or need to take a comfort break. And I think we all know where the toilet facilities are. I'm going to skip the members of the public section, seeing as we don't have any members of the public this evening. I'll pick up by saying to all present, please remember to show respect to others in the meeting and avoid interrupting where possible to enable others to follow the meeting. If any councillor feels concerned about any aspect of the meeting or discussion, please clearly state point of order and I'll then gesture for you to elaborate. If anyone present is felt to be behaving unacceptably, they can be ejected from the meeting by resolution. And thank you for listening. On behalf of the council, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this town council meeting. Okay, thanks for coming everybody. So, Climate Change Subcommittee. First item is apologies for absence. Councillor Ollie Matthews sent his apologies and Councillor Richard Honeyman has kindly agreed to sub for him today. So thank you Councillor Honeyman for coming. Item 2, disclosure of interests. Does anybody have any interests they would like to disclose in relation to matters on tonight's agenda? No, I'll take that as a no. Great. Right, we don't have any public participation item 3 tonight because we don't have anybody present, so I'll skip over that one. So we'll go straight to item 4, which is the climate change update report. So this is a year-end summary for the municipal year that we're just drawing to a close, and also to consider our forward plan for the next year, 24-25. So thank you to Louise Lawrence for preparing the plan. Would you like to just pick out a few key points, Louise, of the plan before we go and take any points and discussions from councillors?
Yeah. So the delivery plan was reviewed in October and it's now being reviewed this month. And we are still working on it. What we've done is attached to the plan with updates written down the side of the plan, and we can go through those and just have a quick look at them once we've finished just going through the pages on this report. So we'll come back to that. We've got a year-end summary for the golf course, just talking about the electric streamers and blowers that we bought instead of petrol, an audit to replace the sprinkler heads and valves to maintain our water and reduce use of water, disease-resistant grasses, and we also are now working on soil and water with our borehole. They're looking at ways to test water in the area and approach us randomly, and we suggested they might want to work with us with our borehole, so that's quite exciting. The other things that we've done across for the year end is introduce compostable toilets, which will have eventually a permanent location at South Hill Barn and at the Crouch. Say the Crouch, I'm really excited about those toilets coming because there haven't been a toilet offer there for a long time. We've obviously taken on our urban grass cutting, and through the grant scheme some green projects have been awarded money. That's the Town Council's grant scheme. And then there's for the forward plan, we're going to be, the council will be looking at how all the committees work, so this one will become within that forward plan consideration. And the intention is that the July subcommittee meeting, which is the next meeting for this committee, will be used to explore the key themes for the new plan that we're putting together. So we'll sort of update it, make sure the things on it that we still want to do, add anything new.
Thank you, Louise. I think I'll just sort of add a little bit to that by saying that, of course, I think just about everybody was at the January full council where we agreed to adopt the climate emergency policy as a council, and we did that kind of in a two-stage process where we agreed it in principle and we agreed a kind of policy going live date of the 30th of June because we wanted to have that time between the two to kind of potentially get ready for being able to put that in place. So that will, the timescale's almost matching up there, but that will come in and inform the discussion in July as well.
Do you want to step through the climate change delivery plan, which is Appendix A?
Just say one thing about the crouch, please, Chair.
Councillor Honeyman, is it related to the climate change?
Well, it is, but the officer says that this is the first time I've had toilets there. As far as I know, there's toilets in the when the football are used, and also when the bowls are used, and also when the community gardens are used. There are toilets around. It's almost as though there's no toilets in the whole.
Yeah, I might stop you there because that's, I mean, I don't really want to go down a direction of assessing the toilets at the Crouch because that has actually changed recently owing to the development of the Con Club and so on. And yes, there are historical toilets that have been there and so on. It's actually quite complex when you start looking into it, but there aren't currently any public facilities. So by putting a compostable toilet there, at least for now, at least there'll be some accessible provision. But thanks for making a point, and I think we'll keep on with the climate change things.
Okay, the post on the right. Otherwise, just talk about the crouch.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so priority one is develop a climate emergency policy, which was adopted.
Sorry, can I just on that
Councillor Buchanan.
Chair, thank you. On that point, is there any steps that need to be taken in preparation for the 30th of June live date?
It's got lots of parts to it. So what's happened is we've had a slight misalignment of the 30th of June and the new meeting dates. So the next meeting date is July, and that's when I think we'll double check and align that policy and this strategy convert into action. It's not.
Okay, so the next meeting is a big meeting.
Pardon?
Next July meeting is a big meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I'm putting forward that we actually go forward and call it a climate action plan to be in keeping with the terminology that's used in other councils throughout the country, which kind of follows on from the climate emergency movement, so on, just so that we're, so that things are easily understood and translatable, but yeah.
Point 2 is enable the council to undertake environmental consideration and decision making. So this was agreed that it would be much like the financial impact, a line at the bottom of all the reports saying what the climate impact, if there was any consideration, was when the report was put through, or any outcome. And what we're looking at the moment is how we measure that. It's actually really difficult to decide what the measurement is, but that's what we'd like to see. So at the bottom, we've looked at Brighton, who have a massive document which they add to the bottom of all their reports, and I think that's probably too much for us. So that's also something that needs to be considered in detail. What is it? Very simple measurements that we put at the bottom. Number 3, inform the new strategic plan for the council. And that's the July subcommittee meeting that we're talking about, where we will look at that and align the strategic plan with the climate emergency policy and with the climate emergency action plan. So those 3 will come together. July is going to be very busy. Yeah, a big one. Play a role in the civic leadership. I think there was 2 things have happened here. One, you've had a meeting where you invited bodies to come and speak to you. And then in terms of doing more, we're going to, in this meeting, look at Lewes District Council's climate, I can't remember the name of the report, it's an attachment in here, climate report. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're going to look at that in this meeting.
Yeah, climate and nature strategy.
Yeah, the climate and nature strategy. They've also got a consultation document. They're going to be feeding back with the consultation document, and that's the point when we want to join in. We're going to feed back our views on the consultation, and then that's the point where we'll be looking at how they're going to engage with the community, and we will want to be doing or joining in with that engagement. The implement car charging points. So LBC's gone ahead and put them in all the car parks, so that's not something we need to do now. We are considering putting charging points at the View because it's our land, and that would be some partnership where we'll earn income from those charging points being there, but that's still early days discussion. Point 6 is the options for Seaford Barn and the green roof at the View. Both of those are ongoing. The View is being looked at the moment, and Seaford Barn's got the working group. 7 is working with local community groups, so that links back to any of the outside bodies we're working with, and also the waiting for the Lewis consultation to land, and to understand how they're going to engage. 8 is continue the ecological approach on the golf course, and we've just talked an overview of what they're doing there. We are doing another piece of work as well at the golf course where we're going to be reaching out and speaking with other golf courses in the local area to look at best practice and sharing. So that will be quite interesting to see how they manage theirs, what we do, and we'll be bringing that back to the golf course in terms of the way we manage it. 9, appropriate management of Seaford Head Local Nature Reserve. So we have regular meetings, 2 meetings a year on that, and we've got outside body representation from councillors. We've got the NNR coming along, but we're also doing work, significant work, both on the farmer's lease and with the Wildlife Trust, looking at cattle grazing that doesn't currently occur on the chalk scrubland. To try and raise the level and quality of the scrubland, and grazing cattle or horses, ponies, will help to do that. So we've got a meeting next week where we're actually going along with all the bodies to have a detailed conversation how we might make that happen. What stopped this happening is unfortunately I'm having a block now. Is it TB?
Yeah,
TB. Yeah, it's TB. And the land boundaries with the fact that we can't move cattle easily. So the Wildlife Trust can't move cattle. The farmer could put cattle on there, but other National Trust have offered, but they can't because of TB. So there's lots of difficulties which we're looking to have. I think quite an exciting meeting next week, looking at how we might get over that. So you might see ponies or cattle soon on the head.
Thank you. Thanks for going through that, Louise. That's hopefully been very useful for everyone. Can I open up the floor to questions and comments from councillors? Councillor Meek?
Thank you, Louise, for explaining lots of that. I guess a lot of what I was going to say will probably have to wait for the July meeting, because I was wondering how, according to the report, I know you're really stretched with officer time and trying to get a lot of these things done, but that shouldn't necessarily mean that climate change issues, go right way down the order. And one of my questions was going to be, if there's a shortage of officer time, is any of this kind of investigative work something that other people could do and feed back to officers in order to, because a lot of this is, it's beyond us as well. This is a lot of it is expert opinion, particularly about how you deal with chalk downland and things like that. I just wondered if that's something that other people or bodies could help with, rather like, I understand, the on the verge grass cutting idea is that other bodies are going to help assess and do scientific study of that. So that was one of my questions. Another question was going to be to do with the way we are engaging, this is also off the back of that if you like, engaging with other bodies about the use of our green spaces. It seems to me that some of this has stalled a bit. Is there an update of the Friends of Blatchington Green with the agreement they wanted to reach, which has been kind of in abeyance for about 3 years now? Seems to have got stuck. I haven't actually been in touch with the lead on that recently, but I know he was saying nothing has happened. And it's a green space that we have in the town at the end of North Way, and they are actually kind of managing it at the moment, but there's no official agreement that's been set up. I know that the town clerk said we've got a really good agreement with Blatchington Pond Group, and that they won the award last year, and I just fail to see why we can't get an agreement with them going forward. I know they've perhaps been a little bit tricky about the way they wanted to go about that, and I did say to them recently, if you just agreed in principle for a trial of a year, you'd have been through that year now, and we've probably got a cast iron agreement. So I'm not saying that it's the council's fault, I'm saying that the volunteers want to do it in a certain way, and I think we have to go some way to accommodating them, and I feel that it would be great if they could be accommodated so that it might set a precedent for other groups to be able to be accommodated with the right wording and the right format so that we could go forward with that. For instance, also, there's Princess Drive, which is a huge, great expanse of grass that we've got there, which I know things have gone forward. There's an orchard idea and things like that, but I just wonder where we were with that as well. I'll leave it there. I've got some other questions, but I don't want to overload you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if you've got specific bits, but I've got something to come in as well.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to remark on that. I mean, I think I'm correct in saying, perhaps before, that we've touched on the idea, if not in this committee, in the Community Services Committee, of actually having a management strategy for our green and open spaces. And I think, you know, at least since I've been in post, which is not even a year, we've had our stakeholder group meetings for the Salts and the Crouch twice, which I think have done really positive things for those two much larger and more kind of shared green spaces, if you like, in terms of the number of stakeholders. But I mean, I would really like to see, as we go through and implement our climate emergency policy and we start to talk about the climate action plan in July, that we actually put an item specifically or a point in that where we can talk about how the policy translates to recommending things to be included in a kind of management plan for our green and open spaces. Now, we've already got one for Seaford Head, which is obviously quite specialist and slightly different as it's a triple SI and so on and so forth, but I'm thinking more sort of about urban green spaces, and perhaps that's something we could do as a committee and then move it forward to community services for the Community Services Committee to consider and implement, or to full council, you know, whichever route it may go. But as a kind of advisory committee, perhaps that's a place where we could have an impact. And Councillor Meek's obviously speaking about a specific green space to which there is history, but you know, we've obviously got more around the town, and I think, you know, perhaps there is a need to have a level playing field, if you like, between them all, and yes, some test beds, but also, you know, having something which it sets out a framework so that A, it makes it easier, and B, it's kind of more equitable across the town. Do you want to
Yeah, shall I just
that, and then I'll
okay, shall I just the Seaford Head bodies in terms of what needs to happen for the chalk grassland. I think that's one area where there are a lot of bodies involved. And one of the things we're doing is using Seaford Head Nature Reserve Group to inform us as holders of that land, the things that we should be doing. And there's lots of information. So every time we meet to talk about things like the area that the Wildlife Trust manages for us, we always have triple SI representation, Southdown National Park representation. So there's lots and lots of eyes on that, and we're not making any decisions in terms of expertise. It's all theirs. And Seaford Head has come up, they did an assessment of 7 areas, and Seaford Head came up as one of the areas with unfortunately a degradation of the grasslands and an area of concern, which is positive for us in a way, because it means we get lots of attention on that area. But the grazing of the cattle or ponies or some sort of grazing is the priority at the moment, which is why I've set up this meeting, and we're going to talk about how we actually get that grazing to start. And it's very particular how the cattle, how the ponies graze, to actually raise the quality of the grassland. In terms of the green spaces management, we've just been on an asset tour, us officers, to look at all our green spaces and get an idea, because we've got quite new people on the team, what we're going to do, and that is exactly where we're thinking we need to go, which is a management strategy. Back when Seaford and Lewis split, lots of pieces of land were just sort of chopped, and we've ended up with very strange strips of land which we're managing that don't connect to other pieces of land, or a bit of land where there's actually a play park behind it. The play park's Lewis, and the access to the land is ours. Doesn't make sense. So we do feel there needs to be some sort of green spaces strategy, and within that we are starting to look at the relationship we have with the bodies who we work with in terms of the green spaces, and some of the like allotments and museum leases, and how we work those relationships to get the best for both parties. So it's a really early piece of work, but the green space I think is really important. We spend a lot of money with ID Verdi, asking them to maintain those spaces, and I think there's some areas where we might want to say, Lewis District, it makes no sense us paying for you to have ID Verdi mow a strip of land, they then go on to mow the rest for you, and we pay for that tiny strip of land. So there's a conversation and discussion by councillors to be had, and it is quite a significant piece of work because we own a lot of green spaces.
Thank you for that. We had, I don't know, we'll go Councillor Borman first, then Councillor Hannigan, and then Councillor Taylor.
Obviously we had an assets working group which looked at, and this is where I think with some of our green spaces we were looking at what we were going to keep and what we could maybe allow other groups to use and things, and I think that's where you're coming from. And obviously this was the previous term, but I've been trying to get that back up and running, because looking at our green spaces, and yes, you say they're tiny little strips of land that are mismatched to things, but there are local groups that are quite happy to tend to it or do something with it, and it is something that really needs to be pushed to come back, is let's re-look at our green spaces, because it is, I say, a drain on our resources, on our income, because we're paying to get it cut or something where we may not need to, when we've got groups that really want to use the land for something. And yes, we might need to give a little bit of leeway with our lease, but that's a discussion to have. But I think some of the groups also need to give us a bit of leeway with where they're coming from to prove themselves. Like you said, let them trial it for a year on this lease and then have another discussion. But yeah, we really do need to be having that assets working group maybe back up and running, or whether we pull it in here to this committee for the climate bit and then put it back to community services.
Thanks very much for that input, Councillor Borman. Councillor Hanlon?
Following on from both Councillor Borman and Councillor Mead. Yes, I mean, it's very good, so there's no way you can do that anyway, even though you'd like to think we'll have to do a strategy across the board. It's not going to work like that really in reality. And obviously at one stage, after the open plan, there's different stages came up, and that's when the Friends groups wanted to be set up. Obviously the Friends and Neighbour of Bridgerton Ponds been going, 25 years or so. It's very difficult compared to something that hasn't been established. So you can't really, as Councillor Mick said, you can't really just, unfortunately, just go ahead with a lease similar to theirs, not at this given time. I know it's a neighbourhood set up in Blatchford Green anyway, as it would be, because it's on the outskirts of Seaford itself. But I mean, obviously, I thought our planning office was involved with that particular aspect of that lease at one stage. So I don't know where you are with the other friends groups. Maybe they're all keen at one stage, but then they've all dissipated now, and they're not really any left. But it's not necessarily us to make sure that there's events held on all of our green spaces all the time, is there? And it's not necessarily, we've got as key parts to do events in quotes. So the local side of things would basically be dealt with by the local neighbourhoods as part of their friends groups. But I think it's quite hard to do a blanket approach completely across all the Seaford anyway on the bits of strip of land we have. Has to be managed quite well. That's my view. But as with climate change, yes, whatever you decide, that has to be part of the initiative, whatever you do on them as well, obviously.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Honeyman. I think that's definitely a point well made there. We'll move to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I was involved in the most recent, which is some years ago now, neighbourhood plan, and doing an audit of the green spaces, which I assume there's some information about that somewhere that's been documented.
Yep.
What's intriguing, and I think they're fantastic spaces in terms of the local communities and the opportunities that they present to those communities. And other communities that don't have them are bereft. I don't think we should forget about those either. I've got one particular one in mind, which is Bishopstown Bungalows, just don't have it. I think the involvement, the opportunity for local people to get involved is certainly there, and we must source it, we must use it. But I don't think it's already, certainly in relation to the ones that I'm familiar with, Princess Drive, I don't think they are already organised. I think it just hasn't been happening. So, that's a lot of work to get involved, to bring the community together, to get them going as a community. But it's something I think we do need to pay some attention to. The other thing, I just want to say one other thing, because it was of concern to me recently, and that is, the who does what between the different levels of council was kind of writ large in relation to, again, it was the tree planting and all of that. I found that illuminating, just in terms of how many interest groups there are, and it's in many ways it's a waste of resource, and we do need to be looking at that. So it's got a number of different perspectives that we need to take on this.
Thank you. Certainly.
I mean, it's a good problem to have.
Yes. Anyone else got any comments? So I think I'll sum up and put things together. So, I mean, I'm aware that during the first development part of the CARES project, if you go on the Seaford Community Partnership website, they've got a bit about how they were aiming to help facilitate the creation of various friends groups. I think some which kind of came to fruition and some perhaps didn't. But coming back to looking at this through a sort of climate change subcommittee lens, because obviously there are lots of benefits and challenges to working with various community groups at sites, which might be a little bit more appropriate to discuss in detail at community services. But coming from a climate change lens, what we might wish to do is if as a council we go forward with developing a management strategy, or whatever we end up calling it, for our green spaces, a set of guiding principles, I suppose, and a strategy rather than an operational plan. The operational plans probably would be different for each green space, but as a sort of guiding principles, I think what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking is that as a climate change subcommittee, that's something which we'd want to input into and say, we'd like to maximise various parameters on our green spaces and think about things like future proofing. So what about creating shade and all those, and addressing drought or flooding and all these kind of things that our green spaces might experience. So maybe with this report,
Just come back one bit.
quickly.
Very quickly, yeah. On the friends group, so the SCP is meeting next month in May anyway. We'll make sure that's on the agenda as an item. I know Captain Cannon comes along as well, so we'll bring that up
That
as
would
a
be useful. thanks.
see us on the friends issues,
Yeah,
friends
get an
group, see
update.
where we are,
Yeah.
see what the momentum is, that's the word.
That would be brilliant, thank you. So I'm just going to the right page. So we recommended to note the contents of the report, and I'm wondering if there would be support for me to also propose that we request that a kind of early stage feasibility sort of study or an early stage paper about a management strategy for the green spaces could come to the July meeting, even if it's just aspects which are pertinent to the climate change subcommittee and not necessarily the whole entire shebang, that we could start thinking about how we might want to integrate that into our climate action plan. Would councillors support that?
I think we'll struggle to put anything between now and July or as a framework, but in terms of the motion to that it's something you want to aim to for July and have a
To put it into the action plan, basically. It doesn't have to be ready.
Yeah.
But it'll be a case of drawing down from our policy, thinking about how that applies to the green spaces and kind of having an early stage. I think that would be, Councillor Meek.
I think that was a great idea, thank you. I was just going to say, I just wondered, Louise, you've been talking about the grazing on Seaford Head,
Yeah.
and I think you're talking about the grazing on the nature reserve, aren't you, specifically?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What something that concerns me a lot, which I think this committee should be concerned about a lot, is the grazing land, which is let to the tenant farmer. As we all know, we're told that grazing, animal grazing, and farming is one of the kind of biggest CO2 emitters, and we have ungulates being grazed on cattle and sheep by our tenant farmer. There are a couple of questions really. I know you're talking to the farmer and you're going to kind of make a new lease.
Yeah.
When is that going to happen?
So the meeting to finalise the lease is May the 1st, and because the lease already went to full council, the draft version, that went to last full council. So the lease discussions with land agents, the farmer, is the 1st of May, and that will then go to full council, which is that July or June, the next full council, after May the 9th? So the final lease will go, and what we've done in that lease, and I'm very open with it, is we've opened some of the clauses around the responsibility of climate change and the farmer and that engagement. So that is now written into the lease, and so changes that we might want to discuss with the farmer, with the Wildlife Trust, with Natural England, because the NNR is coming in. There's so many changes on that piece of land that we have put some clauses in around enabling us to have discussions.
I suppose what I'm asking, is, I feel that we have a responsibility, if we are a climate change committee, to have some kind of influence and input to the kind of things that the farmer could take on. And I'm not saying that these are directives, these should be discussions that we could, to help the farmer to generate alternative incomes perhaps, to farm in different ways, to understand how grants and other applications could be applied for in order to help renew the chalk downland, to put measures in which may be fantastic for the new Natural Nature Reserve, Chalk Nature Reserve idea, and the South Downs as well. I just feel that at the moment we, as a group, aren't being able to engage in any of that conversation. It seems to be down to officers, which might be fine, and if it's a very open-ended lease agreement, that may be fine too. But I'm wondering how we could, as our responsibility in this committee, could help to feed into, help, negotiate, challenge, stimulate that kind of conversation to help the farmer in consultation with experts like the SDMP and chalk downland specialists and people like that, to get this thing to go forward. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
Because I think
there's-
what we've got is a depleted chalk downland, which we have contributed to by allowing very intensive grazing on there, and all we're getting is 10 grand a year from it. And we could help to try and influence how that really prime chalk downland is used through our tenant farmer. See what I mean?
Yeah, and I think sort of taking a step back, there's perhaps a question about this committee's engagement with the Seaford Head Local Nature Reserve Management Committee. I mean, obviously we've got Councillor Meek, you're on that committee as a district councillor, aren't you? No, town? I always get
As
confused
town
which one you're on. You're town, I'm also town. So maybe there's a bit more of a question to be thought about there rather than specifically with the farmer at this point.
Can I? So
Yeah.
may I? Yeah, so two points on that. The farmer's lease goes to full council. There's an opportunity there to comment on the content of the lease and what it's asking of the farmer, and it is different, quite different from the lease that we had before. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the farmer is now fully engaged with Seaford Head Nature Reserve and the whole approach to that headland, which is new as well, because before farming happened and the nature reserve happened and the two didn't cross over. So we're at the beginning stages of those discussions and that relationship, and what comes out of the Seaford Head Nature Reserve conversations, and again, it's a very important group for us because it helps us to make decisions as custodians of the land, is the recommendations from the National Trust, Seaford, the Southdown National Park, the Wildlife Trust and Natural England. So they sit and very boffin-like have their conversations, and out of that we take advice. But we also have lots of other meetings that are starting to happen now, what I call task and finish groups, looking at specific areas with different groups of people on, so that we are actually starting to deliver some action, like on the track, which is deteriorating. So that's the task and finish group that's about to be set up. The grazing is the task and finish group, and the first meeting is next week. And then obviously got the Seaford Head barn development, that will also feed into it. So there's lots of changes, but they're just at the beginning.
Thanks. So yeah, and there's also, as we know across the council, we're going to be considering how our committee structure goes forward. We're sort of having this transition year, and that there's a meeting for committee chairs, as I understand, in May to start formulating something which presumably then will come to full council.
Yes.
So, perhaps that's something, the sort of relationships between the groups and the committees that could be considered alongside that as well. Okay, that's great. Right, I'm gonna, because we're nearly 8:45, I'm gonna move things on a little bit. Sorry, I'm obviously in France. Recommendation to note the contents of the report, and would anyone like to second a proposal to bring, should we call it an outline of a management strategy for green spaces vis-à-vis climate change to July?
Yes, well, it'll have to go up, won't it? So maybe for discussion.
For discussion, yeah. Would anyone like to second that?
I'd second that.
Seconded by Councillor Buchanan. Okay, should I take them together, or anyone want me to take them separately? Together? Okay, all those in favour? I think that's everybody. Myself too. No abstentions and no objections. Okay, brilliant, thank you. Right, let's go on then to item 5. Which is Lewis District Council's Climate and Nature Strategy Refresh Consultation. It's great, thanks to Lewis District Council, to the officers for allowing us to still input into this, even though their kind of final date had gone. We approached them, and thankfully they're letting us still input into it. So I'm not going to go through the whole strategy, it's quite meaty. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to look through most of it. What I will do is to go through the consultation response document, section by section, and we can collect councillors' comments on that. And then the proposal is to allow Louise and myself to formulate a sort of final response, I suppose. So if everyone's happy with that, or has anyone got any particular questions on the report itself? Okay, right.
So it's page 38.
Page 38, thank you so much. So the first question is asking about the vision that LDC would like to have a reach net zero carbon and have what they call a fully climate resilient council. So that's applying to the council rather than the district, as I understand it. And then through partnerships, they will enable the district as a whole to progress to net zero carbon and to address the ecological emergency. They'd like to be able to clearly demonstrate progress on the climate mitigation measures they're taking and lead on adapting ourselves and our communities to reduce the risks posed by projected climate change. This is going to be interesting with 5 choices. Yes, Rod? Yes, Councillor Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. When you say Lewis District, that presumably includes Seaford.
Yes, it does. Yeah, Lewis District. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
all of this on all the pages encompasses Seaford as well.
Yeah, of course they're talking about Lewis District Council and the council operations as one thing,
Yes.
and then the district as a kind of, if you had a Venn diagram, would be circle, working in partnership, so on.
Yes, okay, understood. So where they say council, that's very
Specific.
specific.
That's my understanding. And Councillor Meek, have you had any further involvement with this at all in your district role or not? No, I'm listening. Okay. Right. Would anybody like to make a comment on question 1? Whether we agree, disagree? Shall I start first of all? Does anyone strongly disagree? Anyone disagree? Anyone neither agree nor disagree? Agree. I'll go for that, I think. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to do very unofficial voting here. And strongly agree?
Technical glasses off, can't see it.
Proof of the pudding though, as they say.
Councillor Borman, Councillor Honeyman. Are you strongly agree or agree?
Agree.
Agree, yes. I think we've got a majority on agree for this one. And would anybody like to make particular comment about the LDC's vision for their climate and nature strategy? No?
I was just wondering how they're going to clearly demonstrate, because I know there has been some talk amongst people I know who say they've got very good aspirations, but we're not actually managing to quantify very easily what we're doing. So I just question how you, as Louise was saying earlier, it's very difficult to quantify some of this stuff. So I don't know quite how you clearly demonstrate it very easily. And as we know, we live in an age where people bandy figures about the whole time and assertions and all sorts of things, and you don't know what to believe really. And climate change is one of the worst things for being able to clearly account for anything, as far as I can see. So I just wonder about, well, for me personally, I would question how we can clearly demonstrate that.
Thanks, Councillor Meek. That actually really leads into my way of thinking about this as well. I think that aspirations are totally fantastic. But, you know, where it says a fully climate resilient council, what does that really mean? Have we really defined what is resilience in this context? And, you know, I won't go into a monologue about climate projections and uncertainty and IPCC reports and all the rest of it. Of course I want to see progress. 2030 is actually a very short timescale in some ways when you're talking about climate, especially in terms of data measurement and analysis. In terms of getting action done, we might still think, oh, it's 6 years away and you know, there's a lot to do. But when you look at the other side, when you look at how climate is analysed, it's a very short amount of time. So yeah, for me, I would echo those those queries in how will it be demonstrated, how will it be quantified, and how will we know, or that LDC and also the district as a whole through the partnerships will be making tangible progress. So yeah, that's something I'm happy to feedback. Councillor Honeyman?
Following on what you just been saying there, Chair, obviously there are a lot of partners with that, as you know, on the end of that section, and some of them have got their fancy logos down below, so on the next section. So there must be well-established bodies who do all the analysis of what you're describing, which is still be available now if you really wanted to, because some of these figures, what Council does say, is surely nationally, and then it can be split down regionally and locally. There's figures you get out there if you really want them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question, if you really want them.
I've got first-hand experience of that, because there are the greenhouse gas and CO2 equivalent emissions data for local authorities and districts and so on. How those are actually compiled, you know, there's still some uncertainty there, and you know, over what time scale are we noticing differences? And of course, things like looking at our energy consumption. I mean, I work with data that's, you know, half-hourly resolution at postcode level, so we can get all the data we want. But at the end of the day, when you're thinking about climate, you're looking over a certain period of time, and of course every year the weather's slightly different, and you know, things like climate resilience, we start thinking about volatility in the weather and what we're dealing with, and then, you know, obviously it's very complex when you start going to cost of living and such as well. So I think there's a good point, and there is data out there, but specifically what will that be based on for Lewis District is an interesting point in question. So maybe that's something we could just request a bit more info on. Councillor Buchanan?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just coming back to all those points about 2030 and timescales, a lot of the ambitions that are originally set are obviously, even when you read the material here, not being met or achieved or being moved out. So, I mean, we need to start somewhere, and even if you move it out a bit, we again, we'll start somewhere. But some of these ambitions are, not being achieved to date.
Thanks. Okay. Shall I move on to the next question, or has anyone got any points on that one yet to make? No? Okay. Right. So moving on to section 2 about harnessing community action and expertise. So we have an opportunity for our organisation, the Town Council, to be reflected as a case study in the climate and nature strategy annual update, which would be around 200 words describing our activities and impacts by the end of August. If you would please enter it, okay. And that's where, yeah. So, I mean, personally, I think this would be quite a good thing to do. It's not a long piece, and we could probably pull it from stuff we've already got, and the fact that we've passed our climate emergency policy, I think we're probably one of the first in the district to do that, from what I understand. So that would be quite a good contribution. Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Chair, I really agree with that. We need to be, I mean, we have lots of questions and lots of gaps, It's the same for everybody. We do not want to get left behind though, and we do not want to absent ourselves. I think that would be very bad. So yes.
Does anyone feel strongly differently to that? No? Okay, so I think that's a yes please on that one. And that, you know, again, when we go back with our response, I'm happy to help with drafting if you want me to.
Yes, please.
And then we have, is this the same question or a slightly different question? Reflected as a case study, and then do we have a report or strategy? Well, we can obviously share our climate emergency policy. That's probably the most appropriate thing to do, I would say. So then it goes on to ask about the youth voice and how the council, in this case Lewis District Council, should engage with young people in the district about nature and climate change to make sure their views are heard. Can I have any comments or ideas about this, please? Councillor Walraven.
Sort of get involved with schools and probably youth groups.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, for
Fantastic,
starters.
definitely, yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Councillor Taylor?
Quite an interesting project for I don't know what the term is, young mayor.
Yep. Starting to
Yeah.
Because people often come into those roles and there's not anything specific to get their teeth into, but this could be something,
Yeah.
depending a bit on the kind of interest that person has.
Yeah. Could put forward as an option. So, yeah, and the timing might work quite well as well because we'll get a new young mayor in May, won't we? Councillor Honeyman, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, some of the young mayors have already done some sort of indirectly. Have done some, like the coffee cups or the Seafords, things like that. So there's a lot of them done it. Maybe without specifically thinking of it directly, but and also a lot of the young mayors have got links with the SEO as well. So you've got that to think about. So
Yeah. Okay. So links with existing community organisations.
yeah, like
as
the
well.
SEO.
Yeah. I was just going to add to that, in terms of sort of methods of engagement, I think face-to-face and all that's brilliant, but a lot of our young people today, I don't even have my phone handy, I'll borrow Councillor Buchanan's, but
Right.
They're on the phones, and if there's an opportunity for the council, for Lewis District Council to do that appropriately in a digital way, I think they might get quite a good response as well, and maybe that's something we would also need to be mindful of for our own engagement a bit later on, so I was just going to add digitally into that mix. Okay. Moving forward to point 3, which is asking about the policy framework, alignment with the LDC corporate plan and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Depending on how familiar we all are with these, it might be a bit heavy going, but it's certainly given the UN Sustainable Development Goals in the brief and the policy framework and so on. So just wondering if anybody has any particular comments about that aspect. Yeah.
You raised the point in our meeting about
Yeah.
page 5,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they talk about local, this is page 25 on the whole document, local, and they don't mention districts at all, sorry, town councils at all.
Yeah, so with this diagram here, they're visualising the policy framework, and it goes right from sort of global zooming down into Lewis District, but I think it would be great for LDC to recognise that some of the town and parish councils have their own policies, such as us, which have come forward, and also some of the villages, at least for the ones which are in the national park, have priority statements, I think that's the term, which is used, which even if it's not sort of a full strategic plan, it's got sort of points which achievements that they're aiming to make. So perhaps that could also feature here to sort of get that connectivity shown in the diagram, do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah?
good idea.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's a really good, sorry.
No, please.
I think that's a really good point because there are some quite strong, robust parishes that risk being left out, something like this. And yeah, that's interesting work going on there.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Any other comments on this particular? Yeah, Councillor Buchanan.
Just a quick one, look. Are we actually referring to the latest regulations here? East Sussex Environmental Strategy 2020, Southern Energy Strategy 2018. Have these actually been updated? I don't know. Are we actually referring to the latest and greatest?
I would assume that they've got the latest ones in there. I haven't been through and checked them line by line, as anybody else has.
And this, is it the corporate plan 24-28? Doesn't even exist yet, does it? So that's what's feeding into these things.
Yeah, and that's obviously at the Lewis District Council corporate plan, which is coming in. So
Okay.
work's already begun.
Well, I hope these are the latest.
Okay. Right, okay, right, I think we'll move on from that one into number 4, which is strategic action areas, and it's asking about specifically about kind of energy use, energy efficiency, and the built environment, so buildings and infrastructure. Do you agree with the council's goals? Page 10 of the consultation document. I am going to go and refresh my memory. So they want a 12 megawatt increase in district solar capacity by 2025. There's progress on that. 50% reduction in council energy consumption by 2030. So they've got an increase in gas consumption, but a decrease in electric. They've still got a, yeah, so that's interesting. So that's actually going the other way in terms of there's been a 7.4% increase. So it'll be interesting to know the delivery mechanism for that going forward. 60% reduction in council carbon emissions by 2025. So these, apart from the first one, which talks about capacity in the district, in Lewis district, the second 2 targets are council specific. So whether that makes a difference on how we as a town council want to comment, because to us it's probably the solar one that's more relevant, although I'm not aware of any solar proposals in Seaford. I'm looking around the room for anything substantial. Councillor Honeyman.
We've got feedback from Councillor Matthews, who I'm selling for. He says on this particular bit, we need to be encouraging new builds and renovations to include solar panels. Obviously, he puts in batteries, which is basically what they are, as you know, and heat pumps in their bids. Otherwise, what's the point? There you go. So that's what he's encouraging.
Yeah, so we could tie that in with that in our climate emergency policy. We've got a point there, which is to, I can't remember the exact wording, I don't think we're providing direct advice, but to facilitate the provision of advice in home efficiency measures and so on. And that might be something which, you know, perhaps at July meeting or in the future we, as we'll see with the SWIFT stuff, put as a recommendation to planning and highways. But yeah, so what we could say in this one is where it asks, does your organisation have a strategic goal or target you would like included in the energy and built environment section? We could just direct them to the relevant point in the climate emergency policy.
Yeah.
Councillor Taylor?
Could we also say something about, particularly in relation to solar, there's and heat pumps. It's about also the applications for planning. One would expect to see now applications which are, especially I'm talking about new build applications particularly, which very much celebrate some of these major developments. I don't know, I mean, it would be interesting to know with one of the, say, you know, with one of the most recent developments in Seaford, I'm thinking that one that's on the 259 where the new roundabout suddenly appeared. And you know, what, I'm not asking anyone to answer, I'm not asking anyone here to answer this question right now, but how much attention was given then in a development of that kind, which is quite a major development, to some of these.
I'm not sure of that specific instance, sorry.
Or any instance, but you know, can we not just build it into
National regulations don't cover them. So.
Can I? Yeah, well, that point exactly, and I think...
Councillor. There's nothing, there's no directive, there's no government policy that stipulates you have to. You're encouraged to. And the planning application might be perceived more favourably if it did have those things. But you look at that huge development outside Upfield, there's no solar anywhere near, you know, and we couldn't insist on that at Newlands either.
I'm not suggesting, but we could say, you know, desirable.
Desirable.
Property
developers don't deal with desirable.
No, I think
we don't have to follow that.
If I can pull this in, a lot of this does come from the National Planning and Policy Framework and other directors, and that's one mechanism, and the other, of course, is financial and to do with incentives for installation and price of energy and that kind of thing. So there are different ways, but unfortunately as a town council, you know, and it may be something we want to go forward with in the future and say we would like to put something into our planning responses, but realistically there's not an awful lot we can do about other people's developments. But of course in our strategic plan we've got a point in our council strategic plan to look at our own building assets and assess whether they might be appropriate for installation of on-site renewables. So that's that's something which we could also put in there, I think. If that's okay. Has anyone else got anything, Councillor Borman?
Just one thing is obviously reduction in council's energy consumption. When you have more officers working from home, there's less energy consumption, which means maybe if they've got some solar panels on the roof and it's just producing a small amount and they've only got a small amount of officers there, they've reduced their energy consumption. But all their officers are working from home. So what are they doing for officers working at home using their own energy consumption? They may not have solar panels or anything else, because that still then is carbon going out into the thing. So there is no then mitigation for it. So maybe
question of accounting, isn't it? Really?
It is, yes.
Well, yes. Okay, yeah, okay.
And that's maybe what we should be looking at as a town council, that if officers are working from home, our buildings might be more energy efficient for this, that and the other, but are we producing enough to mitigate officers working from home?
Yeah. Thanks. One more.
Sorry, I was going to say, that's a very fair point, and actually, I don't even you said actually, when I got went to get hire a new flat to live in, I had to make sure there were 2 workspaces, because my partner and I have to work from home. It's actually costing us more money, because that means that we have to have an extra room, because we each have to work separately and can't be overheard in conversation because some of it's confidential. So it's a very important point, and the fact that you're having to heat your building, whereas before you go to an office and the office would be paid for heating wise.
Working practices have changed, and I think the housing market.
Incidentally, I've discovered that quite a few Lewis District Council officers live a long way from Lewis. In fact, up north.
That's an interesting one. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Great points there. Right. Let's gallop on to sustainable travel and air quality, which is page 11 of the document. So, do you agree with the council's goals? So some of them are specific to the council and the council's fleet. Other ones are talking about EV charging points and cycle parking in all car parks by 2025. Now, in Seaford, most, if not all, of the LDC car parks have now got EV charging points, and I have noticed recently that they've gone live after a long wait. Whether I don't think they've all got cycle parking in just yet. Certainly thinking of the 2 that are near me. So, it's asking us, so it's saying revise the date and wording, not practically possible in all car parks. EV charging, I've got cycle park. So, there's a bit of ambiguity there about what their progress is and what the aim actually is. It might be worth saying, because of course we've got the cycling and walking in Seaford study prepared kind of through Seaford Community Partnership, which has been circulated to councillors and is likely to be coming to our July meeting in terms of having a look at it and making recommendations. So it might be good for us to have a look at that and think about whether that has recommended cycle parking in certain places and whether LDC can be helping to facilitate that. Zero carbon fleet by 2030 and air quality action plans for Lewis and Newhaven, which has been delayed. So just to speed things on a bit, so do we all agree with the council's goals, and has anyone got any specific disagreements? So any specific disagreements I'll ask for. No? Councillor Clay?
I've got Councillor Matthews, his point of view. So I'll read that quickly.
Yes.
He thought there should be a bit firmer commitment to develop cycle lanes between the villages and the towns, really. And he said painting some white lines here and there is not going to get anyone on their bikes. nor recycle parking. But we know about the study already done, don't we, in Seaford and cycling?
Yeah.
Which
And
is
we have
sort
to
of
be
on-
mindful of some of the things that are more county
Yeah.
and highways as well.
Absolutely, and that particular study, which obviously a lot of us are aware of, aren't they? The one that had been done for Seaford, is that aimed at the leisure side or the everyday side? A bit of both, really, but it's something that's hard to pick out sometimes. There's that distinction sometimes, isn't there, between the leisure side and everyday
Yeah.
use. So,
Yeah.
but that's
So-
anyway, that's Councillor Matthews' point.
Yeah,
was.
thank you.
So-
Thank you. Okay, so are we all content to put that we broadly agree with that? And then again, on the strategic goals or targets, we can cite what we've got in the climate emergency policy, in if there's anything relevant in our council strategic plan, and we can make mention of the cycling, walking, Seaford report. Yeah, is that okay, those three? So I'm trying to rattle through a bit because of time. Right, so then moving on to biodiversity. They're asking very similar things. So we're on page 12, sorry. So biodiversity net gain is tied in with local plan stuff, and we're going through the process at district of renewing the local plan or putting a new one in, which we obviously had to come to, the last iteration came to receive Town Council's planning and highways, didn't it? Carbon capture funds, so that's been pushed back, and a method to determine locations for tree planting within the district by 2022. They're doing some mapping work with the University of Brighton, so that's quite interesting, I think, because that might tie in a bit with some of our green spaces work at town council level. So perhaps we can put a marker in that we would like to actually engage with them more on that one. Councillor Taylor?
Definitely agree. And there was a difference of opinion here about where things are going to be planted, etc. I wouldn't want to see it removed. So it's got completed remove. I think it's a bit premature.
So perhaps
For us, it's a bit premature.
perhaps we would say there needs to be sort of an engagement and implementation phase with that. And I think, something I was going to say about biodiversity as well is when, certainly in the urban environments, which, and I'm including our urban green spaces, I think they need to be kind of treated as a whole in many ways. And, if the town's looking at what we're doing, if we ignore what assets the district have got and vice versa, we're not going to be as strong as if we consider them together and the connectivity together and the impact we might be able to have together, particularly thinking about things like, what you would call green corridors and such like. So, I would welcome a bit more close working on that, and where possible, in terms of planning and resources and that sort of thing. Do you think that's feasible, practical?
We have had a body come from Brighton Uni, perma trees or
Oh yes.
to talk about it, but that's also stopped the work on that. So
But they were working with Marjorie on some projects and some spaces as well.
Right, okay. So maybe that's something we can touch base on through our OBR side of things.
I think it needs to come together to the green spaces management before decisions are made.
Okay, cool. Right.
Chair, can I just mention what Councillor Matthews thinks there should be more trees generally. More trees means more shade, which means lower temperatures. So not do it randomly, but use it as part of any sort of big building development. Is that part of the strategy you're talking about in a way, or?
Potentially, yeah. We're thinking more green spaces rather than sort of house building type developments. But shade is something I think we spoke about very early on last year, wasn't it, in our away day as well, and that kind of thing. So obviously there are lots of different things people like to use the green spaces for, and they've got to be balanced. But shade will probably become more and more sought after as our temperatures. We get more of these heat waves and things.
Especially, I know maybe a bit more out of our area when we've got the bigger developments. But I know around Helsham and Barfield, like you were saying, the big. Some of those estates are huge, as you know, 400 houses at a go, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are we doing
Well,
trees and all that? I don't, you
well,
have-
I think we'll leave that to Helsham and Uckfield at the moment.
Okay.
Happy to discuss at another point, but let's focus on Seaford.
Why not?
Right, so I'll go for a middle ground. Do we agree with that? Does anybody have any burning disagreements or points they would like to disagree on? So we can tick agree, and I think we can again cite the policy, but maybe put a marker in. To sort of bring things together and do a bit more engagement on that last point to do with the trees and biodiversity specifically. Councillor Buchanan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Coming on to the swifts for the next item, I think in here,
Hang on a minute. Oh yeah, sorry.
the urban birds and looking after them might come under this biodiversity thing for them.
Yeah, we can cite that. We shall consider that in our response after we've discussed the next item. I think it's what I should say.
Urban birds are missed out of all the biodiversity net gains. It's only birds that live in the countryside that get the benefit.
Yeah. Okay, cool, thank you. Right, agriculture and food. Do we agree with what's in the policy there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Meek? Yeah. Okay. I'm not aware as a council, and I'm happy to be corrected, do we have anything specific to do with agriculture and food? I mean, we've obviously got some farmland up at Seaford Head. Do we want to make mention of that? I mean, it's kind of quite
As regards LBC
I think, especially as we discussed it in quite
Yeah.
detail on the first item of the agenda, that we are working with Sussex Wildlife
Yeah.
Trust and the grazing land to encourage all that. That actually that is really a big part
Yeah.
for Seaford of
Yeah.
what we're doing to change the way things were and how we can develop it
Yeah.
as an ongoing thing, and where we've started and where we hope to go with it.
Yeah, great point, thank you. Okay, cool. Right, reducing emissions from waste. Any?
Sorry, one final point on point 2 of that. It says
Yeah.
implement a district and Sussex-wide food strategy. I think
Yeah, what's that?
district and town and parish. I mean, I know they say Sussex-wide, but again, it's likely they're going to miss us.
Yeah.
We have a degree of poverty in Seaford. We've got some parishes that are definitely in the deprivation scale.
Okay, so should we put a marker in for that as well?
What about the work that we've been doing with the allotments and any spaces like there's beds outside Morrison's that we've given for community growth?
Yeah, we can mention that contribution, can't we? Obviously that's in partnership with community groups and so on, so, yeah.
Just looking at our community garden space in the Crouch
Yeah.
and how we can develop and get
Yeah.
more use for the rest of the community.
Yeah, okay, let's put that mark in. Great, thanks, thank you. Okay, emissions from waste, Councillor Hanley.
Just clarity on what Louise has said there, Chair, in the sense of Sussex. Do you mean East Sussex, or do you also include West Sussex and Brighton Hove as well? Depends what you mean by Sussex. It's not obvious, that's not clear, is it really?
Yeah, it says Sussex.
So it doesn't
wide.
matter if it was all of geographical Sussex, if it works, if that's the intention. It's just something you noticed, didn't you?
I think there's quite a bit of keying in with the Brighton and Hove food strategy from what I've
Right,
seen in
okay.
district literature. That's a bit of an anecdotal from me. I don't know if perhaps Councillor Meek or Councillor Clay have got any insight into that. Okay. Okay, so let's carry on because we're not far from the end on this one. Reducing emissions from waste. I'm going to say, does anybody disagree? Should we go with agree? Yeah. Again, apart from the obvious citing policies and so on, policy points and things, is there anything specific that people would like us to include in the comments section? Councillor Honeyman.
The Council Matthews mentioned that, but it's all very well having recycling and reduce emissions, but
Yeah.
where is the waste going? He said there's no point shipping everything over to Malaysia, for example.
Yeah, so again, it's sort of that accounting principle
Yeah, I mean,
of where does it go, and is it truly better for the environment? What's the word I'm looking for? Ethical. Is it truly ethical recycling, so to speak?
As opposed to being dumped on the beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Can I
Yes,
just, I mean,
absolutely.
all the recycling, the recycling material does go up to the Dartford area in London.
Yeah.
There's a huge recycling centre.
Yeah.
Quite what happens to it after that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is the usual thing. Can you trace your complete
Yeah.
line?
So that's
all
the
the way
part.
through?
And my understanding from having attended a talk about it was that it goes up to somewhere in the Dartford area, the bulk of it to this plant, and then what can be turned into commodities, which are saleable products, are then shipped to wherever the demand is, and whatever isn't. I'm not quite sure what happens to that, but yes, it's sort of where do you draw those lines and those boundaries? But perhaps that's something it's more of a curiosity point rather than something which we as a town council need to do on here. Right, water, rivers and seas, so something which probably is a little bit more pertinent to Seaford, particularly with our
Can I just
Seafront,
just want to
Councillor
ask-
Taylor.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I've made a note to myself just in relation to emissions from waste. So we have, I don't know where the view comes into this. Because this is about, does this include restaurant waste in these stats? It wasn't clear.
Commercial waste.
Yeah, commercial waste.
Um,
And does the view
There's normally commercial waste. It's got it comes under different contracts and different.
it just doesn't. It doesn't
Yeah, I'm not sure.
clarify.
I'm not sure with the accounting
Yeah.
whether it's.
So I don't think we should spend time on it here.
No.
But if it's commercial waste, then we
Yeah,
have
it
to
says
take
within
the
this
view.
action area we include the emissions from our waste collection vehicles. So we've got the actual DC fleet.
So they will have a commercial contract,
Yeah.
but the view does not use Lewis as commercial contractors.
Okay.
So that's
Lewis
quite
District,
different.
Lewis District will only pick up commercial waste from whoever pays them, whereas there are other companies that will pick up commercial waste.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I suggest, Chair, that we something that I would sort of very well to say we'll try and reduce the emissions from waste, but the principle is good to have is to actually reduce the production of materials in the first place that you don't need. So try and reduce the amount of material you use so that you don't have so much waste in the first place, which is part of our plastics policy. Don't use single-use plastics. In the first place, they have to recycle.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can express that as a kind of idea to encourage the less production in the first place of stuff that would need to be recycled
Yeah.
or
So it's
waste
kind
in the
of,
first place. Try and reduce commodity, if you like,
Yeah.
so that we don't use so much stuff.
Yeah, so effectively you want to reduce demand for
Stuff that
materials
might
where-
end up having to be recycled
Yeah.
or to be incinerated.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, Becky, can you express that in some way? As a
The only problem with that is you will then always fail to meet the targets of 50% of your waste is recycled. Because if you're reducing everything, you will never ever meet the targets that you're putting in place.
But you know, like if you go to
I know
if
what
you
you-
go
I know
to
what
the
you're
shop
saying.
with your bag and you just put everything, like we used to go to a grocer's in the old days. I remember that you just held your bag open, you said how many
Yeah.
potatoes, carrots, whatever, they just tipped the whole thing in from the weighing scale, and it all went in together. And people expected that. Now they expect everything to be plastic wrapped or containerised to start with. So that's an immediate thing that we used to do 40, 50 years ago that we no longer do very much, except if you go to the grocers at the end of in High Street. But it's quite expensive, so a lot of people won't do that. It is more expensive probably, but sorry.
Food for thought. Excuse the pun. Councillor Buchanan, quickly, because we must.
Even if you did reduce the amount of rubbish because you're reducing the amount of plastic that you're putting in, you would be able to judge it because they know how many kilograms of waste you have per person per year. So they'd be able to do a little bar chart or something that showed that much was the rubbish waste and that much was the recycle. So you would be able to judge it.
This is the problem with targets, isn't it?
Movable feast, yes. Right, okay, let's go on to waters, rivers and seas. So the council goals for waters, rivers and seas on page 15 are, I never get on the right page in time.
100 litres or less water consumed per person per day by 2030.
Yeah, less water consumption, new builds to be water neutral. So that's tied into the local plan. Southern Water delivering water efficiency audits, which apparently is a Greater Brighton target, and 0 new build units approved contrary to environment advice regarding flooding, reduce water consumption in the district, conserve and protect our water resources, including our aquifer. Well, that's something, if we proceed with the National Nature Reserve, is very much centred on the chalk aquifer and how we can move to manage that better. Well managed and protected waterways and coastal areas that benefit residents and the natural environment, and communities that are resilient against flooding and coastal erosion. So does anybody wish to disagree? Councillor Buchanan?
So I don't want to disagree, but what's a water neutral new build?
Yes,
Sorry, I don't know.
Does
No
that
idea.
mean
I
water
don't
harvesting?
think there could be such a thing.
But that's not
Yeah,
drinking water
Yeah,
necessarily.
water harvesting for, you know, so on new builds, and then, sorry, I didn't.
no, please go ahead.
Yeah, so like flushing the loos and, you know, that sort of,
That's
Which
not
could
water
be-
neutral, that's
no.
just offsetting the, which is a good
Could
thing.
be water efficient.
Yes. so
Yeah.
Just wondered what that term meant. That was
Yeah,
all.
yeah. Thanks
I mean,
for bringing
the
that up.
intent is probably good.
Okay, so should we query new builds being water neutral versus more water efficient?
Yes. Excellent. Southern Water failed on their item 3 then.
Just, sorry,
Councillor Honeyman.
on this item, you know we had some recent bad weather when the likes of Lilyhampton got flooded. I know that's West Sussex, but not everyone knows that Newhaven got flooded partly on that same evening. I don't know how much work goes into that surging from tidal surges. I don't know how much work goes into that. Is that included as part of the overall? It doesn't really get the publicity unless something really extreme happens. I just wondered as part of the coastal defence.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
Cut.
suppose here, especially in Seaford, you know, it's the Environment Agency, which is kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a collaboration, isn't there, but primarily responsible
Yes, right, the big.
for the seafront, but then we also have localised problems. For example, is it Chichester Road, have I got that right? The one by the vets down there, and so on, and a few other areas as well. I mean, the Martello Fields get flooded from time to time, don't they? Councillor Meek, you wanted to come in?
I was just going to say, I mean, the district council is doing a lot towards flood mitigation. The Cockshut stream was just
Yeah, for
thing was
Lewis,
just
yeah.
taken. But also, I mean, you know, the flood defence in Lewis are going to be dealt with the new Phoenix project. But also upriver of that, they are trying to start working with farmers to try and mitigate off-run from farmers' fields, and also with Southern Water to try and, you know, not channel everything into single channels, you know, so that it gets blocked further up the catchment area, because that's the problem, is the quick runoff, and then you have everything running down, then you have a high tide, and that causes this conflation of water in the middle, which then has to go somewhere.
Which is what happened last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You've got high tides and a big amount of water coming off.
Which would also be beneficial to us here in Seaford, being further downstream, because you know, obviously the sewage outfalls are a problem, but in comparison with the volume of water and the contamination from some of the agricultural runoff, you know, that's really significant. So, and when we're getting, you know, all comes into the sea and affects our water quality down here, so what happens upstream will obviously affect us here, and perhaps there's more that then in turn can be done down here in Seaford as well. I mean, I think the lower school fields still flood quite a lot. I remember, you know, being at school there and the seagulls paddling on the water a lot, being below sea level. Okay, so we can cite that, and obviously being a coastal town, particularly the seafront and that side of things is very important to us as well. Has anyone got any other specific feedback points that you want included? Councillor Buchanan.
So just from Holly Matthews, Councillor Matthews, was saying obtain greater transparency on sewage dumpings in our rivers and seas. Is that something that Lewis can actually try and
I know Lewis
get a
have
handle on?
got Water Champion and they're trying to work on that as well, so maybe we could have a bit more dialogue with them in terms of, you know,
Well, it's actually, I don't know how, they're unlikely to ever publish a daily, we've opened the sluice gates type of timetable, but
well, there are apps which it actually needs to be published on, and the Environment Agency do some targeted monitoring through the summer months as well. But yeah. Okay, sorry. Sustainable community wealth building. I think we're nearly at the end, aren't we? Yes, this is the last one. Right, well done, everyone, if I may say. Right. Would anyone like to lead with any comments on this section? I was just going to put into this that obviously as a full council we voted to move forward with the, what was it called, High Street Assessment, Economic Assessment Town Centre, which would be a good starting point. I think it would be really good for LDC to work more closely with STC in terms of assessing how the town's doing in terms of, you know, potential decline and so on. I mean, if you look at the Office for National Statistics data, the census data from 2021 compared to 2011, you'll see some quite marked declines in certain parameters in the areas through the town. And I know, obviously, like a lot of places, Seaford is changing and has changed a lot, and I guess we want to keep abreast of that and maximise opportunities where we can to increase the wealth of people in the town. So, I mean, personally, I would welcome a bit more close working, particularly off the back of the study that's going to happen. Would folks be in support of that, or would you feel differently? Yeah. Okay.
Is it also worth mentioning that the council has a policy of working with local companies, local suppliers, the concessions went out to local. One of the key points was they have to be locally living to.
Yeah. That's good. Good foundation point to make, I think. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else got any particular feedback on that one, Councillor Buchanan?
oh, not that one.
Okay. Was it on something else to do with this?
Well, it was to do with the strategic action areas.
Okay, yeah.
The 8 action areas, there's only 7 actually described in here. One's missed off as the Sustainable Council. I don't know whether they're trying to hide something or...
Is that an overarching term perhaps to all the other which
Well,
the
now
others
they
feed
specifically
into?
say 8 action areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there's only these 7 are actually included in the,
Okay.
you know, just what happens. What
Okay.
happens to Sustainable Council.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
That's okay. So that's it, I think. Yes.
Can I just say, I just think we might want to do a sort of overarching comment about the lack of clarity when they're talking about Lewes District
Yeah.
or Sussex or
Mhm.
how,
Sort
because I think we got quite,
Yeah.
we were uncertain about what it meant, and I think if we want to feed in and have impact, we need to have that space for us to feed in and have the impact.
Yeah.
It's not clear.
I think that's a very good point, Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, and just there's a lot of to be confirmed.
Yes.
And how can you agree or disagree with something that's still to
Yeah.
be confirmed? It's a figure or a date or
Yeah.
And
so
actually
we want it to be
it's-
more specific.
it'd be better to have a completed document to
Yeah.
agree or disagree to.
Yeah.
Chair.
Councillor Mitchell.
Sorry.
I'll go. Yeah. Sure.
There's a lot of action happening at Lewes, which is involving lots of parishes and towns.
we form working groups to look at the whole area and the involvement. Is that something that Lewis could do with this plan, with any supporting towns and parishes that would like to nominate somebody like our OBE groups, that they could be part of the input a bit more than just sending out questionnaires?
Yeah, so for future sort of
Working with
future
us, like you
mechanism.
mentioned, with the
Yeah,
town.
okay.
Because there has been a lot of things over the time I've been at council where things have been implemented and it hasn't been discussed with anybody here at Seaford. On many levels.
You can feed that back as a suggestion, actually. Thank you very much, everybody. That's great. Right, should we move on then? Okay, so item 6, report on swifts in Seaford.
Sorry, Chair,
Yes.
resolution.
Sorry, yes. You're quite right, I'm galloping ahead. Yeah, I'm keen. I'm also getting hungry because I haven't had dinner. Right, okay, yes, sorry. So, the subcommittee is recommended to consider, the first one, to consider the Town Council's response to the consultation being run by LDC on its climate and nature strategy, and 2, to delegate power to the head of assets, projects and services in consultation with the chair of the subcommittee to agree a final response based upon the comments raised at the meeting. I'm going to take those together. All in favour, please.
You need a proposal.
Sorry, proposer. Councillor Clay, seconder, Councillor Walraven, and all in favour. Yeah, that's everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Walraven, for keeping them straight and narrow. Right, item 6, report on swifts in Seaford. So, we had a presentation by a lady called Sheila Lovian, who runs Save Seaford Swifts, a community group here, highlighting some of the challenges faced by swifts and other urban dwelling birds in Seaford, and also introducing some of the things that can be done to help provide habitat which is suitable for them, because they've lost a lot of habitat due to changes in housing and so on and so forth. Councillor Buchanan actually is Vice Chair of Climate Change, works quite closely with Save Seaford Swifts to come up with a lot of the content for this report, and thanks to the officers for coming through and helping to sort of translate that into the recommendations, which you'll see. So it's a slightly different format to what we might be used to. Does anyone have any particular questions or things that they would like to talk about the actual contents of the report, or would you like to give a bit of a summary, Councillor Buchanan, more than what I've done, or Louise for that matter, or should we just move through to the recommendations?
I mean, I can have a quick chat about it.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I've been kind of working with Sheila from Save the Swifts for a little while now. And I've been trying to understand what the issue is with the swifts in Seaford. And one of the particular items is swifts like to live in swift bricks. Apparently?
Swift cliffs?
Bricks.
Bricks?
A brick. Yes.
Okay.
Which is brick with a
Yeah.
hole in.
Round boxes?
Well, there's also swift boxes. Slightly different. The brick is something that once it's installed will be there forever. A box may get woodwork, I don't know, it might not have the same lifespan. And swifts do come back to the same nest every year. And apparently it's not just the swifts that enjoy the swift bricks or swift boxes, it's other red-listed birds as well, starlings and other birds. And there was a moment last year where the use of swift bricks was mooted to be included in as a national policy within the planning regulations, building regs. And there was a big debate at Westminster Hall apparently last July, and a lot of the summary of that and the ideas that came out of that are in here. Not as it happens, whilst there was an enormous support for changing the building requirements at national level, it didn't go through because the government didn't think it was the right thing at that time, and so on and so on. Anyway, so the issue with Swifts is actually firmly placed with local planning authorities, not with national government. And that's where this whole report kind of fell out of, is how we as a local authority, whilst again we don't have specific control over planning issues, we can influence them through Lewis. So that's the intent as much as anything behind this report, how we could help the already listed urban birds in Seaford.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buchanan, for that excellent summary.
Yes, so what this report is actually saying is there's 5 recommendations. The recommendation is there's a full report recommendation to go to full council, there's a recommendation to go to community services, which is recommendation 2. So recommendation 1 is to full council, recommendation 2 is community services committee, recommendation 3 is to go to the planning committee, and recommendation 5 is to go in the Seaford neighbourhood plan. So just as a summary, what you're recommending here.
Yeah. And I think is the first one as well, just that we as a council help to promote, the issues affecting the Swifts and what can be done in terms of sort of marketing and so on. Okay, brilliant. Right, any comments or questions? Councillor Lee?
Just a comment to say I think this is an excellent initiative, and I think we should support Sheila in her work, and thank you, Councillor Buchanan, for doing that. Just to say, I think it's going to be difficult on domestic things to get people to do it. Mind you, you might find you might have more success with that than with developers, if you can kind of gently persuade people to do the right thing. Having said that, the care home that is stalled, or actually is now happening again on Henfield Road, does have Swift boxes, interestingly enough. It will be interesting to see if they actually get used this year. But of course, there's going to be lots of work carrying on now, because it's about a year behind schedule now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that interesting point.
Just quickly following up on that, I think it was because Sheila wrote to the LDC planning officer on that issue.
Very good. Excellent.
Community action. Okay, so we've recapped over the recommendations. Is everybody happy for me to take them together? Councillor Honeyman, just
bit unclear about the neighbourhood plan because it's already been done. So you say take it to the neighbourhood plan. So you mean that it gets updated?
About the next iteration when it comes in the future.
I was going to say because it's not. It's more desirable as opposed to compulsory.
Yes. Councillor Buchanan, sorry.
So Chair, just a quick one on each of these items. The actual thing we're voting on is to consider the 5 recommendations. Could we have consider and move forward with?
Yes, I was actually going to slightly propose to slightly change the wording, which we did discuss slightly before this, which was to adopt the recommendations and put them forward to the appropriate committee or full council as suggested in the report. So that would be one, rather than just consider them, that we are actually sort of explicitly wanting to move these recommendations forward to the appropriate committees as identified in the report. So if everybody is content with that wording. So that will be the first one, and the second one would read again. Okay, so to adopt the recommendations contained within the report.
Is it recommend for adoption? I don't know if this committee can adopt.
We could adopt those recommendations because they then recommend that it goes as a bit of a chain, a bit of a daisy chain.
It's additional to, it was resolved to agree, because there's recommendation within the report.
Yeah.
So my minute in is, it was resolved to agree, it was resolved to agree. I think there's a motion before that, is that what you're saying?
So it's this, to consider, we want to change this wording in here.
We want to action the 5 recommendations, basically.
Okay.
Agree and action.
Can I just take consider out to
Yeah.
to
Right.
to agree to recommend to
Yes.
full
Yes.
council
Yes,
planning.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
To
Councillor
take the
Gorman.
consideration out because we've considered it now.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Councillor Gorman, that's great.
So to agree to recommend.
Yeah, so that's how I have them, all of them individually.
Oh, so, I mean,
Yeah,
we,
so so you're agreeing to
Yeah,
all of them,
yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. And then the second recommendation is to recommend, again, what was considering it as just throwing it slightly, to make a recommendation to full council that Save Seaford Swifts becomes a formal outside body of the town council, commanding an outside body representative. Now I did have a thought about this one, if I can indulge, you can indulge me in speaking to this for a second. I'm completely behind the sentiment and the intention of that, but I'm also aware that there are quite a lot of community groups involved in various different species and all various different nature related aspects in Seaford, and I'm kind of just thinking that as a council, if we have outside bodies for all of them, that might become quite a lot of sort of a time commitment. But as it's my understanding that a lot of them are coming together kind of under an umbrella now, which is called Seaford Action for Nature, and it's kind of coming together through the Renaturing Seaford website. And I'm not saying they're all becoming one organisation, but I think there's a bit more of a linkage there. And whereas as a town council, I know we've got quite a good working relationship with groups such as On the Verge and Trees for Seaford and some others. Perhaps it might be a little bit more efficient to kind of say that we would engage with Seaford Action for Nature if indeed that body is bringing together a lot of these other community groups. I don't know how you see that,
Could I
Councillor.
suggest in that case that we leave number 2 just as it is?
Leave it as it is.
Or that we would consider it
Oh, yeah, okay.
without actioning anything?
But I suppose, does that have to come to the May to the 8th meeting? We've only got one chance per year, don't we? Do we?
No,
It
yeah.
has to go,
To the annual general meeting.
for a new group.
Yeah, but how well established is the group? How often do they meet and all the rest of it? Is it quite a strong?
I don't know,
So
Councillor.
the main,
Can
you can't-
answer that?
I'm not sure about that, but
Exactly.
the reason that I think that the suggestion to make Seaford Swifts an outside body was to do with the way the Seaford Town Council would be able to promote on their website. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you can't promote the stuff without them being an outside body.
Yeah.
So that's the reason that this outside body issue has kind of come up. And quite honestly, in this case, and equally, quite honestly, if there's other natural nature organisations that might also be nicely promoted on the website, then I'm not sure why that would necessarily be an issue.
Councillor Burness?
Can I just ask, if we became an outside body rep of this one where everyone's kind of getting together, could we then promote all the sub-organisations off of it? That are all involved quite intently with that one group?
Don't know the answer to that.
Only because if we're already outside body reps for that one and that one and that one,
Yeah.
but not these,
Yeah.
and actually we're saying this is the better one to be involved in because it's bringing them all together, that we come off of those ones to support that with everyone, but then shouldn't we be then supporting everyone that's involved fully in that?
Yeah, we'll take Councillor Meek and then maybe the officers.
Councillors who've been on council before, am I right in thinking that we had an outside body representative for Green Havens? Green Havens was an umbrella organisation that covered about 50 or 80 groups. So I think what you're saying could happen, but there was an overarching body that looked after all those little groups, a representative, if you like. So I think there might be a precedent set.
I think we only promoted what Green Havens put out, not what the smaller ones wanted, only if they had said it.
Okay. Maybe.
Hello? Do you have a...
Yeah, so
We've got a wider
Councillor
issue
Honeyman,
got a wider issue now. Now you're talking about obviously Green Havens and so on. So is it the April where we deal with the committees as well as the outside bodies, or is that, I've forgotten what goes on the annual meeting now? It's all the same meeting, is it?
Yeah.
Everything. Right. Going back to outside bodies then. So just because we have a representative on an outside body doesn't necessarily mean to say it's endorsed by the town council as such, is it? And if there is a rep on it, it doesn't mean to say we endorse everything they do. Isn't that correct? See what I mean?
Yeah. So there's a list of the reason it gets onto the website is there's a
Yeah.
list of all the groups that have an outside body representative in terms of a councillor.
Yeah.
And we have an outside body representative list.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's how they get on. So you could put the Swifts on for now to
Yeah.
make this work.
Should
and
I?
then consider?
Yeah. Should I? How about to consider? Point 2 could be to consider recommending to full council that Save Seaford Swifts or a future umbrella group which they are part of becomes the formal outside body of the town council, and that way we've given ourselves the flexibility.
Makes sense. I like that.
Except it won't come on.
If they're not ready
yet,
now,
because
the
they won't
process.
yet be an outside body. So it will miss it for a year, won't it?
I'd leave it as it is,
Yeah.
recommend it as it is,
Yeah, okay.
and then we might have a little bit more knowledge
Yeah.
by the time we get to the
Yeah,
annual
yeah, yeah.
meeting and can discuss it more in
Okay.
depth and maybe change it then.
Yeah, okay, thanks. All right, cool. Right, so I'm not going to repeat them again, 'cause I think I've read them out enough. Okay, let's take them together. Can I have a proposer for both the recommendations, please? Councillor Buchanan and a seconder. Councillor Borman, thank you. And all those in favour? Excellent. Well, that's everybody, and that's made life easy. Thank you very much. Right, and with that, I will thank everybody for coming along and for all your amazing contributions and for persisting with it all. It is 8:50. I'm going to close the meeting.